In this video, I'm going to take you guys inside a real-world mastering project that I just wrapped up for one of my clients. I'm going to show you the entire mastering chain and walk you through my process, showing you each effect, the settings that I've used, and explaining why. Let's start off by taking a look at the before and after so you can A/B the results.
I came here on a spaceship, a prodigal from Mars. Is anybody out there? I'll be on the stars. I came here on a spaceship, and I don't know where I am, but I know I don't belong here. Is anyone out there watching?
Big shout outs to the artist on this one, Angus Wilson. He's a good friend of mine that I've worked with a lot over the years, and it's been an absolute honor to engineer this song for him. Check him out on Spotify and give him some love. All right, let's hop into the session. Okay, let's go through the mastering chain effect by effect. The very first thing that I'm using is a FabFilter Pro-Q3. Why am I using EQ at the beginning of the chain? Well, it's because the very next effect, I usually start my chain with saturation, if I'm going to use saturation at all on the master. And in this case I'm using the black box HG-2MS, which you see right after Pro-Q3. And I wanted to control and shape the bottom end a little bit into the saturator. I felt like the kick was a little bit too hot and on top of the mix, and that would definitely push saturation in the black box plugin. So let's just take a listen to the bottom end of what I was processing here.
They tell me
So you can see I'm using a subtractive low shelf filter just to knock a dB and a half off using the dynamic aspect. And then down the bottom end, you might think this is a cut filter. It's actually not. This is a low shelf filter. I wanted to leave the EQ in natural phase, not linear phase. And rather than using a cut filter, which I felt would be too aggressive and heavy-handed and also could shift phase, I opted instead to just go with a low shelf filter on this one to get rid of some extreme low end that was coming through in the signal. So really simple, just trimming up the low end a little bit. Very next in the chain, we have the HG-2MS, and this is a really fantastic saturation plugin just to give it some extra heat and juice. And yeah, this is just a fantastic plugin. So let's listen to before and after.
They tell me that I ran all night and day, and that it's not that.
So how have I set this up? One thing that you have to be very careful of when you're adding any type of saturation is that you're not increasing level. So you can see I've gain staged down the output to level match, and that's a really, really critical part of adding effects in a mastering chain. You can so easily fool your ears to think that louder is better. And saturation plugins, especially this one, just adds a ton of gain as soon as you turn it on and turn the saturation circuits on. I have it set up in mid-side, and I like that on the master because a lot of times I don't want to saturate the sides as much, or at least I want independent control. So really, I've left it pretty tame, pretty chill here. I have really just adjusted the filter here on the sides. So I've done a high pass and just filtered out the very bottom end of the sides, and otherwise just juiced it up with a bit of saturation. And I like the heat that this brings. Now, one thing that I will also say is we have 4 different states up here. You can copy and paste between them. And oftentimes on my master, I test between different states. And I use the B, C, and D for that. So you can see I have something loaded into A. This is what we ended up going with. And then the B state, I tested out the alternate tube, which will make it a bit louder in the mid. And then I've pushed up the level of the sides a little bit, partially to compensate and partially just to see what it sounds like with the master being a bit wider. So let's go A-B between those two. You can hear what I was playing with.
They tell me that I ran all night and day, and that it's not that far away.
Cool. Ultimately, I went with the A version because I felt like the alternate tube, which is a bit hotter, was pushing the lead vocal just a little much for my taste. So I went with the tamer version. Next in the chain, we have some multi-band compression in FabFilter Pro-MB. And I'm not a huge fan of compression, certainly not single band compression on masters. A lot of the times when I try my master with compression or not with compression, I prefer the version without compression. But in this case, I'm using a multi-band compressor, which is very, very different than a broadband single band compressor. And I'm using this to really do some tonal shaping and to control the dynamics in the different regions. So crossovers are set at 200 and 2500. And if we take a look at the bottom band, you can see I am compressing it a bit. So if we solo that up. So what's going on there? First of all, you'll notice my attack is really backed off, and that's because I don't want to be killing the transient of the kick drum. So I'm letting the limiter, the clipper, and the limiter downstream of this take care of the actual transient. And I'm really just having the compressor settings be more for a loud compressor. I'm compressing a little bit, and then I'm adding some makeup gain to compensate for it. So I'm just controlling the bass range is really what this band is doing. Now, if we take a look at the mid band.
They tell me that I ran all night and day, and that it's broad that.
Similar, I'm controlling this frequency band where the instruments and a lot of the vocal is sitting. I'm just giving them a little squeeze, but I'm using a much faster attack here because I'm not as concerned with letting transients bleed through. I really want to actually use this a bit more as a peak detection and to rein in the peaks in this mid band. And really, we're just being quite gentle with this. I'm just a little bit of makeup gain. And then very similarly in the top end. So there's our multi-band compressor setup. Next in the chain is the dangerous BAX EQ. And I use this for general tonal shaping. So yes, the multi-band compressor is doing some tonal shaping for sure, but I use this just for broad spectral shaping of the master. And in this case, you can see I'm using a high cut at 28K. And I have a little bit of push going on as well here with the high shelf. So here we go.
They tell me that I ran all night and day, and that it's brought that far away.
And in general, I really like this EQ. One of the things I like about it a lot is that you can't just endlessly fuss with it. You have to choose from these very clear pot spots in the actual parameters. So you have to choose, do I want to cut at 70? Do I want to cut at 28? What sounds better? And usually when you're making adjustments between these discrete positions, it becomes rather obvious what you need to do. So I like that about this particular device, which is modeled on the actual hardware, of course. Okay. Next up, we're using a de-esser. And I found once I was starting to add these other effects, especially some of the saturation and the high boosting, I started to feel a little bit of the sibilance in the lead vocal. So I'm just using the preset under here called Vocal De-Essing in Music. And then I'm just adjusting this. So this is really just catching the sibilants that are in the lead vocal and reining those in a little bit with a split band compression algorithm.
They tell me that I ran all night and day, and that it's brought that far away.
Just little touches here. Nothing too dramatic, nothing too heavy-handed. Moving on. Next up, we've got some stereo widening using iZotope Ozone. I don't always use this. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I have lots of other ways to widen frequency bands of a master. But in this case, I wanted to use this because I actually wanted to make it not just change the mid-side balance of the bands. You can see I have my crossover set at 12K and 3K, and I'm just pushing the top two bands, these guys right here, and making them a bit wider. But the feature in this plugin that I use when I want to make something extra wide, which I did in this case, is I use the stereoize feature. So you can see, I'll A/B with it on and off so you can really hear. And it's quite extreme what it does. It makes it a lot wider. So let's just bypass the whole plugin. I'll turn it on, and then I'll A/B with the stereoize on and off, and really just listen into the top end.
They tell me that I ran all night and day, and that it's not that far away. Does anyone look to the mountains? Does anybody stare in hopes that you may find somebody there?
So out of everything in the mastering chain so far, that's probably the most heavy-handed effect that I've used. And then we just go into gain reduction. So now the final two plugins, I'm using a clipper before a limiter. That's a really common setup for me. I don't typically just leave it all to a limiter. And I'm very particular about the clipper and the limiter that I use, as you should be if you're mastering. So first up is K-Clip. And K-Clip is, I have many clippers. I've tried a lot of different types of clippers, and this is my absolute go-to. I cannot recommend this plugin enough. The workflow in it is amazing. It sounds amazing. It does the job. It does it quickly. And the feature that I like one of the most about it is this link button. So you link it, you turn up the input, it turns down the output at the same time. So you're not fooling yourself by pushing gain into a fixed threshold. And astoundingly to me, so many clippers don't do that. So many gain reduction effects, you just turn up the gain into a fixed threshold, and you have no way of easily compensating for that by linking the input and the output. It's like a obvious, you should do this feature. The other thing I like about it is it's got an A/B. And again, so many plugins just that are otherwise good fall flat on their face because they don't give you an A/B compare. And if a plugin doesn't have that, I'm not using it in mastering. Typically, because a lot of times I'm comparing between very detailed effects settings that can have a dramatic impact on the sound of the master, and I want to be able to flip back and forth quickly and easily. And the way to do that is with these A/B compare states. So yeah, what am I doing in the clipper? Let's take a look here. So I will play, and you can take a look at the interface. You'll be able to see the actual clips that are happening in red.
They tell me that I ran all night and day, and that it's not that far.
So you can see here, max, I'm getting about 3.3 decibels of clipping. You can see the clipping in the red. And that's not that much, especially given the program material. The program material is pretty dynamic. That kick drum is really on top. And this plugin also has a delta function. So now I'm going to turn the delta function on and off, and you'll be able to hear what the clipper is removing. Okay, so listen for this. And my goal with clipping is to be as transparent as possible. I do not want to be clipping things that you're going to miss. I don't want to be dulling the transients a ton. I really just want to be removing these hyper short little tiny peaks that would otherwise make the limiter kind of overwork and freak out. And I want to remove those just to clean up the master before it hits the limiter. Okay, so let's listen with the delta signal on and off.
They tell me that I ran all night and day.
So you're hearing the clipper work by just removing things that are just a few milliseconds long. We're not going to miss them, but they're pieces of the signal that would otherwise be triggering the limiter's peak detection algorithm, and we don't want that. So I'm sharing the load, splitting the load between the clipper and the limiter, and I like this setup, and I use it a lot in my masters. The other thing that I'm going to mention here is I do not oversample the clipper. That is a topic for another video that I will publish soon, but I don't oversample the clipper, and I don't oversample my limiter. Really quickly, why I do that, or rather don't do that with oversampling, is because if you want your gain reduction circuit, the detection circuit, to detect accurate sample peak level, then you can't oversample. As soon as you get into oversampling, it's going to start picking up a higher peak level, which is the same thing that TPL or true peak limiting does. So in this case, I want to use the smallest amount of clipping and the smallest amount of limiting possible to get my signal to where it needs to be. I don't want it to be reading higher levels and limiting or clipping more. And as soon as you engage oversampling, that's exactly what's happening. It's going to read a higher peak level and it's going to be clipping and limiting more, which will damage the fidelity of your master by reducing the punch of your transients and potentially introducing more intermodulation distortion. Okay, again, topic for another video. I'm going to get into that, but I just wanted to explain that I am not oversampling. A lot of people confuse oversampling with quality, and that is not the case. There are times to use it, but this is not one of them for me. Okay, the final effect, the limiter. Okay, and I always test multiple limiters in my masters because I've found it quite unpredictable to know which limiter is going to sound the best. And I've been really shocked, even though you think, well, you know, is limiting really that hard? You build a limiting algorithm. Are they really that different from limiter to limiter? In my experience, yeah, they are. Wildly different, actually, even with single band to single band limiters. So I always preview a variety of different limiters. And in this case, I was previewing Pro-L2 versus Limitless. Limitless is a multi-band limiter, so they are very different animals. And I'm always comparing. And then even in the limiters, like we said, the A-B state, right? I'm always using the A-B state to compare even different limiter settings. Okay, so it is going to get louder. And what I can do here actually is just enable 1-to-1. So it's going to adjust loudness for us. So it's going to be unity gain. And yeah, let's check it out with the limiter on and off.
They tell me that I ran all night and day, and that it's not that far away. Does anyone look to the mountains? Does anybody stare in hopes that you may find somebody there? Has anybody found there?
And there we have it. There's the mastering chain step by step. And I wanted to walk you through the settings, explain some of the rationale why, if there's anything you want me to get deeper into, or I didn't explain well enough for you, or you just want me to cover that step in the process better, please let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to expand. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this one and got a lot out of that walkthrough. Drop me a comment below and let me know what you thought about it. Do you want to see more content like this? This is kind of a new format for me, so I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Also, where to go next? I would highly suggest that you check out a newer video that I published on how to build the same acoustic modules that this control room is made out of. I'll pop that up in the cards. Also, I would highly suggest that you check out the full playlist that I have on mixing and mastering. It has videos like this, in-depth walkthroughs on all kinds of audio engineering techniques that you'll find super valuable if you liked this one. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Happy music making, and I will catch you on the next one. Cheers.
Spaceship, and I don't know where I am, but I know